Welcome to the Look Forward podcast from S&P Global. My name is Molly Mintz. I'm the lead strategist for research and development at S&P Global Ratings. When this podcast originally launched 6 years ago, I was supporting the show as its executive producer behind the scenes. Now I'm thrilled to be back in the studio and in front of our audience as one of the show's new hosts. In today's rapidly shifting markets, success depends on anticipating what's next on the horizon. The experts who excel are professionals who can spot emerging trends before they fully materialize. With the Look Forward podcast, you can access the forward-looking intelligence you need to navigate uncertainty with confidence. The Look Forward podcast delivers fresh insights, deeper analyses, and innovative approaches that are essential in this rapidly changing world to help you prepare for future risks and opportunities. We bring you specialist perspectives on capital markets, trade and supply chains, the multidimensional energy transition, sustainability and climate, global realignment, technology and digital disruption, and beyond. This podcast connects you with S&P Global's Look Forward Council, bringing cutting-edge research on long-term trends and transformative market shifts with a sharp focus on what these developments mean for the decisions that will shape your tomorrow. I'm looking forward to always learning with you. Data centers are the factories of the 21st century digital economy and essential to artificial intelligence-driven transformation. The investment boom powering this revolution is already becoming the largest contributor to U.S. growth. S&P Global 451 Research estimates that U.S. data center capacity represents over 40% of the global total, and that figure is projected to continue growing. Asia Pacific follows as second, with Europe a distant third. On the global stage, nations worldwide are engaged in an AI race, determining the future of economic competitiveness, national security, and societal paradigms. But expansion in the data center industry faces limitations due to AI's significant energy consumption challenges and power demand constraints, increased competition for opportunities, and sustainability concerns over increasing emissions and water stress, among other risks. To discuss the frontier for data centers on the cusp of forthcoming research from S&P Global's Look Forward Council, I'm thrilled to be joined by two pioneering subject matter experts from S&P Global 451 Research. Kelly Morgan, Research Director for Data Center Infrastructure at 451 Research, and Brian Partridge, Head of Research at 451 Research. Kelly, Brian, thanks so much for coming on the Look Forward podcast. Let's start off with the fundamentals. Would you please explain your roles and share with our audience why data centers are such an important focus for your research?
I guess I can start. So Kelly Morgan, I head up the data center team at 451, where I've been covering data centers for 20 years, and they were not that important until Gen AI. I mean, they were very important, but nobody knew about them. So I like to joke that now, since Gen AI and this kind of massive increase in need and request for data center capacity, my mom knows what I do now. So I'll pass it on to Brian.
Hey, Molly. Hey, Kelly. It's great to be with you both. So I'm Brian Partridge. My role is I'm the global head of research for 451 Research. I've actually been with 451 for over 10 years and has worked as an IT analyst for over 20 now. S&P Global acquired 451 actually back in late 2019. So just a little context about 451. So our analysts have been tracking the evolution of the IT market for the past 25 years. Our clients tend to be a mix of tech vendors and users, service providers, energy companies, more recently investors, and we're really providing a range of intelligence focused broadly on the most disruptive tech innovations across a broad landscape. So what we're doing every day is our teams are focused on companies, we're focused on trends, demand signals across this broad stack of technologies. And so why data centers now? Well, the first thing to say, and Kelly just said it, right, is they've always mattered to us. And well before we've entered what we're calling the AI era. And these buildings and all the stuff that goes in them is really the physical layer of IT. And I'll say that we've built one of the strongest teams around and data sets in the industry centered on data center operators, assets, and markets. But with AI now in the picture, it really requires a fundamental upgrade of the physical infrastructure to run those workloads. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. But really what is so important to know is that this AI boom has created this super cycle investment, and data centers really sit at the front and center to this entire movement.
Brian, on that front, let's unpack how data center investments are increasingly moving the macro needle. Our latest Look Forward Journal research finds that AI-driven data center growth added roughly half a percentage point to U.S. GDP in mid-2025. What's behind this surge? Will these investments translate into lasting productivity gains rather than just a construction boom?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to unpack there, but fundamentally it's true. Data centers and the infrastructure that supports them are becoming a critical engine for the US economy and beyond. The recent surge in investment isn't just about land or buildings, of course. It includes the servers, the racks, the cooling systems, the software, and the R&D that power these facilities. So our analysis at S&P suggests that these combined investments added a roughly a half percentage point, as you mentioned. And that's a clear sign that AI infrastructure is now a major economic contributor, not just a tech narrative or story. And this shift is transforming the tech sector itself. When we think about the public cloud providers, we call them hyperscalers in our world, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, AWS, they're now investing with revenue capex ratios comparable to like what the telecom operators will do during a major network build phase. So that's really creating a high-tech capital and energy intensive set of facilities, which is really not what they've traditionally done in the past in a lot of corners. So the result of this is big tech is becoming more capex heavy, more energy intensive, increasingly influential on productivity widely. The key question, which you raised, right, Molly, is where and how and when will this drive lasting productivity gains? So it's early. Our 451 research demand side data suggests that the expectations for scale remain high, but long-term impact here really depends on a number of factors, which is how effectively AI can augment labor, drive efficiency, and integrate into business processes. And these are complex challenges. They require a complete rethink of workflows and the human-machine interplay. And that's not easy. But essentially, where we are today is the infrastructure is being ground for these transformations. And the translation to sustained economic benefits will vary by industry, by company, by specific processes. Like, for instance, in areas like software development and customer experience, the impact of AI is already pronounced and producing outcomes. Some industries are still trying to figure out what they're going to do.
Obviously, capital is continuing to flow into digital infrastructure investments. I want to note that these projects demand an enormous amount of upfront capital from a plethora of sources. While market fundamentals are healthy, the sector's capital intensity and reliance on AI could pose risks, given that the ultimate timing of widespread AI adoption and the eventual size of the overall market are yet to be realized. So, Brian, how serious are these risks and what should market participants be watching for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's an important question. And I would say generally the AI and the AI infrastructure and data center market are a very interesting spot right now. So when we think about where we sit today, the fundamentals, I would agree, are strong. Demand is outpacing supply, occupancy and rents are rising, and pricing power is supporting sort of near-term growth. At the same time, these projects are incredibly capital intensive, often relying on billions of dollars of public and private financing to get up off the ground. And in the end, success really depends on AI revenue materializing at scale, which it has not yet. So we really need to watch and understand the demand signal. This is something that 451 is doing every day, especially around inference. And what we're looking for is sustained enterprise adoption beyond pilots. This is called AI diffusion. And watching this mix from training to inference, because inference is really where the rubber hits the road for AI monetization. Other risks that we're actively monitoring, as our clients are as well, are things like speculative construction. So those are like building projects without committed tenants. And if a lot of that happens, and we've seen some signs of potentially some of that sort of bubbling up, it creates potential for oversupply, especially if demand slows. We're also monitoring structural constraints and policy tailwinds, things like power availability on the grid, behind the meter, the permitting required to get new power infrastructure up and running, equipment lead times, and regulatory signals, whether they be about sovereign compute requirements, incentives, sustainability rules. All of that will determine, which regions can best service their AI demand and which projects at the micro level may face execution or stranded asset risk. At the same time, though, there's tremendous upside here, which is why there's so much excitement and momentum in this space, right? This isn't just about buildings and servers. This is about powering breakthroughs in science, technology, accelerating things like drug discovery, immense productivity gains. The potential here for economic and societal value goes far beyond traditional returns. So it's essential to be mindful of the risk factors, but also understand that the risks are about transformational impact across these industries. So to summary, right, the takeaway is that strong fundamentals exist today. Certain companies, sectors may get overheated depending on their local market dynamics or what's happening within the company. This is a highly competitive field, which is actually quite healthy for the market, and not everybody's going to win. So what's required for our clients is an active approach to risk management and paying close attention to the market signals that are relevant to your specific set of exposures.
Now, Kelly, over to you. Let's change gears and look at data centers' energy demands, specifically electricity. How are data centers impacting the U.S. power grid, and what challenges does this pose?
Yeah, well, one of the key issues has been the sudden rise in data center demand for electricity. So in the US, data centers were typically growing by about 6 to 8% a year, sort of single digit growth in terms of their demand for electricity. And then all of a sudden, post ChatGPT, as generative AI has taken off, that demand increased to 19, 20%. We have it at anywhere between 15 to 20% over the next few years. And so that was already a huge leap right there. And there have been plenty of challenges just with supply chain and getting these things built. But when it comes to energy, this was a particular challenge because the US energy grid was actually used to pretty flat growth for the past, I think, decade. There's been relatively flat growth in terms of amount of energy used. And although there were plans that would grow due to electric vehicles and various other things, this pretty much took the industry by surprise. And then, so as a result, there are lots of challenges getting that kind of newly requested amount of power to the right place at the right time. And another key challenge here is that the time horizons for data centers are very different than the typical time horizons for utilities. So a data center can be built in a year to 2 years, assuming all their permitting is lined up, whereas building a new power plant, right, is on a much longer time scale. And even the transmission lines and getting substations put in and all the infrastructure requirements for power, that can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years in a lot of cases. So that means fundamentally we're in a crunch at the moment, where the utilities are getting pressure from the data centers having always kind of requested data center capacity and requested energy and not had to really worry about getting it. I mean, in some locations they did. And now all of a sudden that is pretty much the key constraint to growth in particular locations around the US. So lots going on trying to balance those two aspects out, really.
So in this context, what role do on-site energy solutions play?
Yes. So that is kind of the hoped for relief valve, I would say. A lot of data center firms are kind of planning that if they can't get their power in time, they could set up their own power behind the meter to either sort of transition them to an eventual grid connection or perhaps just be used to power the data center. That, of course, adds a huge level of complexity. A lot of these data centers are not used to becoming power plant operators, so there's that. It adds a whole level of capex that folks weren't prepared for necessarily, right? You're building your data center, but you also have to build a natural gas fired power plant. And it may not be easy to get everything you need to build that behind the meter power either. So as a company at S&P, we're doing a lot of research on where might behind the meter power be required? Where might it be needed? What are the options? I think the preferred option at the moment for a lot of data center firms is to use natural gas fired power plants, but those turbines that are required to build those are all sold out for the next few years. And also in a lot of locations, the quantity of natural gas might not be available in the next year, right? So there are all kinds of challenges there. And some things that might be sort of quick and easy to connect, such as solar power, right? Or in some locations, maybe wind power. Typically, data centers haven't wanted kind of uneven power, right? They want very steady supply that's very reliable. They're not used to dealing with supply that might not be consistent. So the industry is looking at options like batteries and various ways to get around that, but it's certainly, I would say, pushing the whole industry to become more creative and look at a lot of different solutions to try to get around this.
Okay, Kelly, another question for you. How can data centers balance growth with sustainability goals?
Yes, that's back to me. So part of this challenge with the renewable energy, when we've asked most of the big data center consumers, right, the firms that want to use these data centers to put their AI equipment, do still plan to try to meet their sustainability targets. So they haven't just thrown those out the window due to generative AI. To meet those sustainability targets, we get back to that question of whether you want to connect a solar farm directly to your data center and what kind of issues does that pose. Typically, up until now, the data center providers have been paying for green energy to be added to the grid, but not directly to the data center. I think that will continue. The top IT firms have been essentially the top customers for PPAs, for paying for these renewable resources to be added to the grid. That will continue, but we are also seeing some other efforts to both make the data centers more efficient, to use less water, for example. And the challenge there is that often to use less water, you need to use more power. So then you need more green power. They're looking at longer term approaches to add more sustainable power. So that in some cases could be nuclear. They're looking at things like geothermal in certain locations, right? So any options. And then we are seeing, certainly in some locations, and this is pretty complicated to do, but we're seeing it in Europe, for example, quite a lot, having the data center become part of really an energy ecosystem so that they're feeding leftover heat from the data center. So a lot of energy goes into the data center and comes out as heat, essentially. And that heat can be used for other things. So it's being plugged into heating systems to heat people's homes. It can be plugged into industrial systems, greenhouses, for example. We're seeing that. We're seeing data centers heat swimming pools, right? So there are also ways to become sustainable in sharing kind of the output of what they're producing.
Okay. Looking outside of the US, the Middle East is also emerging as a global data center force, driven by cloud computing and AI demand, with Saudi Arabia in particular experiencing a digital transformation as it seeks to diversify its economy. Kelly, what's driving this momentum and what unique opportunities and challenges are defining this market?
So on Saudi Arabia, essentially what we're seeing for data center growth globally is that we're seeing it, I think, in a similar way to the way public cloud expanded. So it initially was launched in the US, got the first start there, and that's what we're seeing with AI. AI has been kind of kicked off in the US, and that's where most of the growth comes from initially. But then it ends up being rolled out around the world, and typically IT providers, AI providers would start with key hubs in key locations, right? So they're looking for one or two hubs in Europe, some hubs in Asia, hubs in the Middle East. And we have quite a few countries around the world now kind of vying to become those main hubs. And one of the key issues, one of the ways that determines whether you'll become a hub is whether you have energy available. And then also, to a certain degree, government support. And that's what we're seeing in Saudi Arabia. So I think the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is making an effort to become one of those key hubs to serve Middle East, I think Africa, possibly part of Europe. And the benefits that they can offer are state government, a kind of approach, a government support system to help data centers get permitting, to help align power infrastructure with data center infrastructure and where that's needed. And then just in general to provide available power to these things and to kind of provide a way of forward looking planning to make sure there will be enough power to support the data center demand. So that's what we're seeing there.
Brian, I'm bringing this back to you. Looking forward to 2026, what themes do you expect to change the AI and data center narrative, and what trends are you most excited about?
Right now, as we speak, we're sort of finalizing the agenda, and I'm taking in input from a broad swath of stakeholders across S&P on the key sort of items we're going to work on as part of the Look Forward Council right now. But I'll call out three major trends that we're excited about and we'll be investing our time and energy in sort of uncovering and covering next year. It has to start on this whole evolution from sort of the training mode or phase of AI adoption to inference, and really understanding the implications of what that's going to look like globally and in the hot spots of the marketplace. That's going to really have a great amount of impact on the data center footprint that's required, how much compute is going to be required at different locations. You can think of it like from the very, very large data center all the way out to somebody's pocket. And AI is going to actually live in all of these places. And the inference phase is going to require more far-flung compute, which has impact on all of these different things. So really understanding what are the applications and use cases of AI that are going to drive the architectural requirement and where the inference needs to be is something that we're looking at closely. The other thing I would say is sort of compute sovereignty. And overall sort of global strategy around AI. So we're already focused on this, but it's interesting, and we have plans to sort of double click on different countries to understand what are they doing to secure their compute capacity, how are they building sustainable and reliable supply chains to actually bring these ecosystems together, and speed's the name of the game here. How are they dealing with critical minerals and ensuring that they've got access to the rare earths and copper and things that they need in order to compete, to do what Kelly said, which is to create their AI hubs. And then there's just so much interesting innovation happening within the AI stack itself at the data center layer, like in terms of heating, cooling, and efficiency designs. I mean, these AI data centers are a rethink of how data centers are built. So we're going to be seeing a lot of innovations in places like liquid cooling. Kelly mentioned behind the meter. I mean, we see that as a really interesting opportunity for us to bring value to those ecosystems, but also a place for innovation and potentially even like around the corner, things like what's the role for small modular reactors on the nuclear side down the line to sort of support some of these requirements. So there are many, many things that we're focused on. But I would call out those three as maybe the most interesting and exciting.
Kelly, what can we additionally expect for the global energy and resource challenges shaping data center expansion?
Well, as I think Brian was saying, we're trying to figure out what the next likely source of energy generation will be. And certainly nuclear is in that conversation. Lots of investment being made there. The key question there is timeline. But yes, all over the world, I think a lot of countries are looking at their plans for growth on both the energy generation side and transmission. One of the key issues, really everywhere, I think, but we've certainly seen this in places like the UK and China and the US. A lot of times, your key generation hubs, particularly for renewables, are not in the locations where either the data centers want to be or certainly where your population is. So I think a lot of countries are doing rethinking about how to get that power to the right location. Do you bring it from Scotland down to London? Do you bring it from Western China to Eastern China? Or do you try to get all the data centers to move to Scotland and Western China? So that's all being discussed and debated. And I think a lot of government policy is, government regulators are trying to figure out how to set up policies to determine this going forward.
And since we have the crystal ball in our hands looking into the future, how close is the market to seeing quantum computers integrated into traditional data centers? What hurdles do we have left to actually overcome?
Well, yes, that is a great crystal ball question. Quantum computers are mostly in the lab. They're starting to move out of the lab. We are starting to see real compute happening. But they do require very specific setups, I would say. So there are various types of quantum computers. Some require very cold infrastructure. Everything has to be super chilled. Others require, or maybe in a way, all of them, but some of them are more focused on seismic isolation. There can't be any movement. Others need protection from electromagnetic rays, for example. So they require some very specific things that typically don't exist in current data centers. So I think as quantum computing grows, we're likely to just see continued builds of specific quantum computers rather than seeing them move into typical regular data centers. Interestingly, they're also in slightly different spots than most of the mega data center markets. They're near where there are labs and research and advanced, work being done on quantum computing. So places like Boston, Silicon Valley is a classic, but Boston isn't known for a huge number of data centers. We have a few. I live here, but not a lot. But so we are starting to see some expansion of that. I think one of the key questions that we're still waiting to figure out is whether quantum will disrupt AI and whether actually quantum computing could take over some of that work currently expected to be done by AI and whether that will kind of impact the energy requirements. And so far, in terms of energy required for quantum computing, it will depend which type we end up sort of seeing used the most. Certainly the ultra cooled data centers use plenty of energy, so that might not end up saving energy, but perhaps they'll do a lot more calculations in one sort of using the same amount of energy than AI computers. That's all still to be determined, but coming soon.
So, of course, with all of these dynamics at play, understanding the nuances of how rapidly the digital revolution is adapting and advancing is more critical and clearly more competitive than ever. Brian, where is S&P Global investing in talent and tools to better crystallize and forecast data center and energy demand?
Yeah, sure. So I'll speak for the parts of S&P where Kelly and I are most involved. And what I can say is we're investing heavily both in talent and tools to really help our clients navigate this fast moving environment. And that's across data center, AI, IT, and energy. So things that we're working on is And I want to make sure everyone understands we already have global coverage, but what we're going to be doing is developing even deeper global coverage in hotspot regions. And I would call out places like the Middle East, which we've talked about, even Africa and India, to get deeper and broader in the understanding and surfacing for our clients the regional dynamics that are driving the data center growth and energy dynamics in the market. You'll see a lot more quantitative and forecasting enhancements coming from our teams. We're growing our quantitative modeling team to do forecasts in U.S. energy demand by region, by energy region, by state. We're extending our planning horizons well beyond what would be traditional in the IT world of 5 years, all the way out to what's required in energy, which goes out beyond 10. You'll see a lot more strategic strategic modeling from us and scenario modeling. So developing a number of AI-driven electricity demand scenarios, looking at grid constraints in partnership with the power teams, tracking the regulatory impacts at the state and local level, federal levels, and really just generating the insights that are required to navigate this fast-moving market for investors, for operators, and for energy ecosystem participants.
It's clear that data centers are a critical engine for AI, cloud, and economic growth, both domestically and globally. Thank you, Kelly and Brian, for these essential insights. Thank you for listening to the Look Forward podcast. To read the research we discussed, please visit spglobal.com. I'm Molly Mintz, and I'm looking forward to advancing essential intelligence with you next time.